Humans are still stupid. Hey y'all, welcome back to another Aerospace Engineering Student Explains video. Today we're returning to the topic of stupid engineering mistakes from spaceflight history. If you haven't seen the last part, don't worry, it won't be needed here, but feel free to do so if you're interested. We'll start off this video on June 4th, 1996. On this day, European launch provider Aerospace performed the maiden launch of their new Ariane 5 rocket. This new rocket was an evolution of their Ariane 4 rocket and thus reused some of Ariane 4's software, which will be important in a second. The launch began beautifully, with the rocket flying more or less as expected for about 37 seconds. At that point, however, the rocket suddenly pitched over as hard as it could before being shredded to pieces by the aerodynamic forces. Why would the rocket do this? Well, it comes back to that reused software. One of the sections of code reused for Ariane 5 was the program for the inertial guidance system. This system was used for navigation in the early phases of flight. I won't go into too much detail because it gets a little complicated, but basically, there was a value in the inertial guidance system called horizontal bias. Due to a trajectory difference between Ariane 4 and Ariane 5, the number became much higher than it would be on an Ariane 4 launch. So high, in fact, that the value overflowed, leading to the failure. This was extra stupid because there were 3 different and simple ways that this error could have been avoided. First, the tests done to verify that the Ariane 4 software would work on Ariane 5 didn't include the changes to the flight trajectory that caused the issue. Second, no overflow protection was used for the horizontal bias value, even though it was considered to be a critical variable. And the worst of them all is that the horizontal bias variable was used for the first 40 seconds of flight on Ariane 4, but it wasn't needed after liftoff for Ariane 5. This meant that the system that caused the failure could have just been programmed to turn off after liftoff and the whole failure would not have happened.
Oh my PC!
Our next stupid mistake is probably the most famous stupid mistake in spaceflight history. In fact, you may have heard about it during a high school physics or chemistry class. On December 11th, 1998, NASA launched their brand new Mars Climate Orbiter, which, believe it or not, was an orbiter meant to study Mars's climate. I'm telling you, engineers suck at creative names. Anyways, on September 23, 1999, Mars Climate Orbiter reached Mars. As it passed behind the red planet from Earth's perspective, radio contact with the probe was lost. This was completely expected. What was less expected was that contact was lost 49 seconds early, and more critically, that it was never reestablished. So what happened to the Mars Climate Orbiter? Well, it all comes down to units. Specifically, we need to look at the interactions between 2 of the sections of the ground-based trajectory calculation software. One of these sections was created by Lockheed Martin, and the other was created by NASA. The problem arose in how the 2 systems communicated the impulse for the trajectory correction maneuvers. The Lockheed Martin section of the system outputted the impulse in pound force seconds, while the NASA portion read that value in Newton seconds. As you might expect, this resulted in the trajectory maneuvers being miscalculated. By the time the orbiter reached the red planet, it came about 170 kilometers closer than expected, leaving it to be destroyed in the Martian atmosphere. Yeah, now you can see why your science teachers use this as an example of why you should specify your units. Mars Climate Orbiter wasn't NASA's only Mars mission set to arrive in 1999. Later that year, on December 3rd, 1999, NASA's Mars Polar Lander mission arrived, intending to land near Mars's South Pole. Again, the creativity in these names is utterly astounding. As the probe approached the planet and detached from its transfer stage, communication was lost. This was expected because the lander's communication equipment was stowed away to protect it from the violent atmospheric entry. The real problem was that, just like Mars Climate Orbiter, the communications with Mars Polar Lander were never reestablished. The cause of the failure has never been able to be completely confirmed because, well, we don't exactly have a lot of communication data with the lander at the time of the failure. This doesn't mean that we don't have a pretty good idea about what happened, though. The Failure Review Board for Polar Lander determined that the most probable cause of the failure occurred prior to the probe landing. The issue with landing on Mars is that its atmosphere is very thin, only about 1 to 2% that of Earth's. This means that it's very difficult to land with just parachutes. This means that Mars' polar lander used rocket engines to land rather than a parachute. So where did the failure happen exactly? Well, when the lander was about 40 meters above the surface, it deployed its landing legs. As you might imagine, dropping these landing legs into place caused a good deal of vibrations in the lander. So many vibrations, in fact, that the landing program thought that the vibrations were actually coming from the landing itself, meaning that the probe now cut its engines while it was still about 40 meters up, leaving it to fall down and be destroyed on impact with the surface. Again, there's no way to know for sure if this is what happened, but it's the most likely failure, and it's a pretty stupid way to lose a Mars lander, especially since it happened 3 months after another NASA failure at Mars. Our final stupid mistake for the day is a lot more recent. In July of 2013, a Russian Proton rocket carrying 3 GLONASS satellites had an explosive failure. I can't show you the footage of the event because it gets copyright claimed every time it's put on YouTube, but I can give you a short description with an artist's rendition of it. For the first few seconds, the launch appeared to go normally. Then, the rocket began to wobble back and forth slowly. After this, it began a slow yaw over until it crashed into the ground and was blown to smithereens. So what exactly happened? Well, in order for the rocket to control itself, it had angular velocity sensors. On this launch, these sensors were installed upside down. This was quite an achievement for the technician who installed them, as not only were there arrows pointing to indicate which direction to install the sensors, but they were also shaped in a way that it was only possible to install them the correct way up. This means that the technician installing them likely had to hammer the sensors into place with a lot of force. Obviously, launching with the sensors upside down made controlling the rocket impossible. It is still astounding to me that this substantial mistake wasn't caught by any quality control personnel prior to the launch.
A cylinder.
The circle.
I think that goes in
The circle.
the square hole.
As we can see, humans are dumb. So next time you make a stupid mistake, just be happy it didn't cost millions of dollars. Thanks for watching my video. If you want to see a part 3 to this series, let me know. As always, please consider liking the video and leaving a comment, as each comment does a lot for a channel as small as mine. Also, if you like my content, consider subscribing, since YouTube doesn't always recommend content from a channel of my size, even if you have seen it before. And if you didn't like the video, have feedback on how I can improve my content, or have ideas for other missions or topics I should cover, please let me know. I'm always looking to improve. Anyways, I've got to go now. Don't be stupid.